Good morning, and thank you all so much for being here on this historic day, January 27th, 2022, the day that declares the Equal Rights Amendment in force, having met all requirements set out in the Constitution, passage by Congress, ratification by 38 states. More than 200 of the country's leading constitutional scholars agree with us, so we're going to believe them. January 27th marks the end of the two-year preparation period outlined in the amendment. We are prepared, we are ready to go with plans in place to help all 50 states review their statutes to remove those in conflict with the ERA. There can be no discrimination based on sex in the United States. My name is Carol Jenkins. I'm president and CEO of the ERA Coalition and the Fund for Women's Equality. We speak for 210 national and local organizations representing millions of people who want equality and who want it now. We are often described as the dreamers, and we are that, but we are also the workers, and we have kept this flame of equality burning for almost 100 years. Today, we celebrate Alice Paul, who introduced the amendment in Congress in 1923, Shirley Chisholm, Gloria Steinem, and Ellie Smeal, who's with us today, who worked to pass it out of Congress, and that was 50 years ago. And the legislators in Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia who delivered us the final states we needed for ratification. We've got a lot of news today. This morning, President Biden issued a public statement in support of the ERA and announced that the Department of Justice has issued a clarifying memo that revises the previous administration's memo that totally blocked the ERA. The new memo places responsibility in Congress and in the court. So good luck, Congress. The Senate is moving forward with its bill to eliminate the time limit. Breaking news on that today. And the House has introduced a historic resolution declaring the ERA in full force. We begin today with Senator Ben Cardin. His work with Senator Murkowski on the bill to remove the time limit from the ERA is so important. We're grateful for his leadership. Senator Cardin, breaking news today.
Well, first, to Carol Jenkins and all that are involved in the ERA Coalition, congratulations on just your incredible work of organizing our nation. Because as you know, so many people in this country believe the Equal Rights Amendment is already part of our Constitution. And we know that it's not. We know that the strict standards scrutiny on review is not present in regard to gender discrimination issues. So we know the importance of getting the Equal Rights Amendment into the Constitution of the United States. So to Carol Jenkins, first of all, thank you for your extraordinary leadership during these times as we celebrate the second anniversary of the 38th state ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. We need to get this done. There can be no limit on equality. We can't put a limit on equality. And that's where the Congress comes in, because when it originally passed the Equal Rights Amendment, it placed a time limit on it, it extended it once, and it's clearly within Congress's ability to clarify that point. And I say clarify it because, as you have pointed out, and as President Biden announced today, 38 states have ratified. There should be no time limit on equality. We shouldn't have a procedural block to equality. The Equal Rights Amendment should be acknowledged as part of our Constitution. That's what we hope the courts will do. But Congress has a vital role to play as well. And I know that Congresswoman Spear is on the phone. I want to congratulate her for her leadership on WebEx. I also want to acknowledge Macy Arona, my colleague in the Senate, who is with us today. We have a responsibility to pass the resolution. In the Senate, it is Senate Resolution 1, indicating the priority that has been put on this by Leader Schumer, that we need to get this done, that would remove the time limit in the Equal Rights Amendment. So there's no challenge as to whether there's a limit on time on the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. But Carol, I just really want to give you the breaking news, and that is we now have 52 co-sponsors of the Senate resolution. All 50 Democrats, or those who organized with the Democratic caucus, including our two independents, have all signed on to the Equal Rights Amendment, as well as Senator Murkowski, the original co-sponsor with me of the Equal Rights Amendment, and Senator Collins. So we're up to 52. So we're moving in the right direction. We need to get across the finish line, get this done. We need to win in Congress, and we need to win in the courts, and we have to win on behalf of the American people. It is wonderful to be part of this, of your group, the strategies that we're using, sticking together. It's good to hear what the president had to say today. We recognize that we still have challenges in the courts and in Congress. Let's get to the finish line to make sure that it is acknowledged that the United States at long last has incorporated the Equal Rights Amendment in its Constitution, which most Americans think is already there. Let's make sure it's done, and let's get it done this year. Thank you.
Senator Cardin, thank you so much. And thank you for that breaking news. I know you've worked so hard to get that done. We're with you all the way there. We're honored to have Senator Mazie Hirono here with us this morning. She's been a stalwart supporter of the Equal Rights Amendment and likes to remind us that the Aloha State was the first to ratify the ERA after it was introduced. Thank you, Senator, for taking time to be with us on this historic day.
Thank you very much, Carol, and to all of the advocates on this Zoom call who have been fighting for the Equal Rights Amendment for what seems like forever. And to the pantheon of women who have been pushing for this, I'd like to add my friend and colleague, Patsy Mink, for whom Title IX was renamed the Patsy T. Mink Equal Rights in Education Act, because Patsy has been in the forefront, as were all the other women. It is pretty unbelievable, Carol, that here we are and we still do not have the ERA. And as my colleague Ben Cardin said, most Americans think that that is already part of our Constitution, but it is not. And so here we are, we're in the courts, and really to fight this out in the courts is a kind of a long process. And therefore, if Congress can act to remove whatever limitations that have been read into, by the way, the ERA amendment itself. I mean, really, this is reading into the ERA language that's not even in the amendment itself. So we need to get this done, as my friend Ben is saying. However, we know we have challenges in the Senate. I'm glad that through the efforts of so many of you, as well as my colleagues, that we now have two Republican co-sponsors. We need to get to 60 if we do not eliminate the roadblock of a filibuster. So the fight continues. This is the anniversary when the 2-year, within this time frame, should already be in effect, the ERA. So the battle continues. And as I've said so many times, the battles we thought we had won don't stay won. This is one that we thought we had won, but not. So that we need to continue to fight. And I thank all of you for recognizing how important it is to provide equal protection for everyone in our country. And clearly, any kind of discrimination on the basis of gender and sex should be totally eliminated, and the strictest scrutiny should be provided when there is this kind of discrimination taking place. Thank you once again, as we say in Hawaii, mahalo nui loa, and thank you also for mentioning that Hawaii was the first state in the union to ratify the ERA.
Thank you so much, Senator, for your leadership in this and so many other things before us in the country today. Next, we have remarks from another good friend of the ERA Coalition, House Oversight and Reform Committee Chair Carolyn Maloney. I see that Congresswoman Jackie Speier is also in the room. We're going to have these two magnificent leaders tell us about the breaking news from the House. Chair Maloney. I think that Chair Maloney is getting her audio ready. Congresswoman Jackie Speier, who has twice in the House eliminated the time limit and now has an historic resolution that is being introduced. We're so proud of all of the work, and thank you for being with us, Congresswoman Speier.
Thank you, Carol. We could not do it without you and Ellie Smeal, Michelle Cowan, Christian Nunez, Donna Lent, Jocelyn Tate, Linda Coberly, Bettina Hager, and Sophia Arman. You have been the warriors that have assisted us and held us up and got us going and have never failed us. So thank you. And Senator Cardin and Senator Hirona, you have been equally great teammates in this effort. So we are celebrating today that, in fact, the ERA is law. The only problem is it hasn't been published. And that is what we have implored the archivists to do, because 38 states have indeed ratified it. It is required under the amendment that we wait 2 years under Section 3. We've done that. And so we should be really thrilled that we have accomplished this goal. Now, having said that, we have an opinion from the former president, Donald Trump, that quashed our efforts. And it has certainly been an opinion that we wanted to have withdrawn. President Biden has, through the Attorney General, issued a new opinion that basically says, it's up to you, Congress, it's up to you and the courts. So, you know, there's never been a battle for women's rights that hasn't taken a very long time. And it has forced women to chain themselves to the fence outside the White House, to go on hunger strikes, to have their eyes poked out, to be sexually assaulted in jail. We don't want any of those things to happen, but we do want the Equal Rights Amendment to be law. 85% of the countries in the world already have an Equal Rights Amendment in their Constitution. Think about that. Here we are, the Constitution that everyone glorifies, that so many countries emulate, and ours is the one that does not have an Equal Rights Amendment. And it really makes a difference. Ask people like Christy Brancala, who at Virginia Tech was raped by 2 football players and tried to sue in federal court under VAWA. And the courts found that Congress didn't have the authority. Think about that Congress didn't have the authority. Or Tracy Rexroth in Arizona, who gets hired by the Arizona Department of Education along with a man. They have the same job. The only difference was, even though their experience was the same, they were properly qualified. The only difference was she was paid $17,000 less a year because they relied on the previous salary of the individual. And so we know women tend to be paid less than men over and over again. So she received as a salary $17,000 less than her colleague, goes through the district court and is declined. Now, if the Equal Rights Amendment were in place, it would be so very different. So we're excited today because my co-lead, Carolyn Maloney, who is a force to be reckoned with, and I are introducing a resolution stating the Equal Rights Amendment is law in the United States of America. We already have 130 co-sponsors, and I believe strongly that by continuing to send this message, we are going to get to the finish line. We couldn't do it without all of you, and we're deeply grateful to you. Thank you.
Well, Congresswoman, thank you so much. The resolution is wonderful. We'll put it in the, in the chat so you can access that. And, I do want to tell you, I don't know whether you know, Congresswoman and Chair Maloney as well, that Ellie Smeal, who was there on the floor 50 years ago when she read your last line, cried. So, for all of the people who fought so long for this to come to this date where we can finally say that the ERA is alive and well, we thank you for all of the work. You may know, speaking of the Department of Justice and the Office of Legal Counsel, that the attorneys general of the final 3 states who ratified the ERA have sued the archivist, demanding that he publish in the Constitution the ERA. We know that, we are proceeding without it, but we have with us now Michelle Kalin, who is the former Virginia Solicitor General, the first woman, by the way, who wrote the Attorneys General brief in this case. She's with us. She's on the advisory council here at the ERA Coalition. Michelle, thanks so much for joining us. If you could update us on on the case, and what you think of the clarification of the OLC memo.
Sure. So thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here. This is my first time doing something like this in a personal capacity because I left the Attorney General's office just a couple of weeks ago. But 2 years ago to this day, Virginia ratified the Equal Rights Amendment and was the 38th and final state needed to ratify. And that's particularly meaningful and was really exciting and meaningful for us in Virginia at the time, because for so long, Virginia was on the wrong side of history. Virginia, we were in Richmond at the time. Richmond had been the capital of the Confederacy. It took until 1952 for Virginia to ratify the 19th Amendment. Virginia's Attorney General argued the wrong side of Brown v. Board and Loving v. Virginia. In that case, Virginia was defending its law against interracial marriage. And as recently as 1996, Virginia argued against women being allowed to be part of the Virginia Military Institute. So it's exciting that Virginia was the final state needed to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. And for the first time, we were able to, or for after being on the wrong side of history for so long, being able to lead the litigation to enshrine the Equal Rights Amendment in the Constitution and fight to have it recognized was extremely meaningful. After Virginia ratified 2 years ago, it was not unexpected, but the three states that ratified after the deadline that Congress had set gave the Archivist an opportunity to do the right thing and certify and publish the Equal Rights Amendment. But because the Trump Office of Legal Counsel had issued an opinion saying that the states' ratifications did not count, it was unsurprising that the Archivist refused to publish and certify the Equal Rights Amendment. And so the three states that had recently ratified sued to get the Archivist to certify and publish. That was Virginia, Illinois, and Nevada. As the case was pending, 5 states had intervened in order to oppose the Equal Rights Amendment. So the structure of the suit was that the 3 states that ratified after the deadline were suing to get their ratifications recognized. And on the other side of the lawsuit was the Department of Justice representing the Archivist and 5 states who oppose ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment. One of the key issues in the case is whether or not the time limit and the preamble of the language that Congress of the Equal Rights Amendment, whether that time limit meant that the state's ratifications were invalid. And one of the state's arguments is that the time limit outside of the language that's actually ratified by the states does not invalidate subsequent state ratifications. The district court below disagreed with that argument and held that the deadline affixed to the outside the text of the Equal Rights Amendment meant that the ratifications could be late, and also held that the states do not have, the 3 states that sued did not have standing. As Carol mentioned, the Office of Legal Counsel administration basically just said that the issue was more complicated than the Trump administration had let on, but did not change position on the Equal Rights Amendment and basically punted and said, Congress, courts, the ball is in your court now. And so it makes it all the more important that the other players in our constitutional structure play their role and help assure that the Equal Rights Amendment is recognized. One way to do that is for Congress to just make clear that there is no deadline on equality and that the deadline is not binding on the states that ratified after the deadline. Certainly, if Congress can impose a deadline, it can remove that deadline. The lawsuit is now pending in the DC Circuit. As Carol had mentioned, the 3 states leading the charge had filed their brief, and now the Department of Justice and the intervening states briefs are due March 4th, and the reply brief of the plaintiff states is due March 25th. So I'm excited to see where this all goes, and unfortunately from the sidelines, not as one of the litigators in the case, but I'm also very excited to see Congress support these efforts and to see people recognize that the Constitution does enshrine sex-based equality. On a personal note, I have a 2-year-old who was born right around the time Virginia ratified, and my hope is that when she can read and she can open a constitution, she can look and see the 28th Amendment recognizing her equality expressly there in our Constitution.
Michelle, thank you so much. We hope so too. And we do want to, we understand that we do have some reporters in the room. We'd like to open for a beat to see if there are any questions while Senator Cardin, Congresswoman Spear, former Solicitor General Kalin are all in the room. So let's do that. Do we have any questions at this point? Chrissy, if you can manage that, that would be great.
And for press, if you want to put your question in the Q&A or raise your little virtual hand, we can try to unmute you and get you here if you have a question. Oh, Carrie Baker raised her hand, so let's see. All right, go ahead, Carrie. You might need to unmute.
Hi, sorry. Yes, this is Carrie Baker from Ms. Magazine. I had a question. According to the brief filed by Kathleen Sullivan and 16 other leading constitutional law scholars in the ratifying states lawsuit, an amendment to the Constitution is valid when ratified by the legislatures of 3/4 of the states and requires no additional action by Congress or by anyone else, including the Archivist, after ratification by the final state. Isn't the ERA already part of the Constitution? And why do we still need congressional action or executive branch action at all?
Senator Cardin, would you like to take that? Congresswoman Spear?
We agree with that. We believe it is part of the Constitution. The enforcement, of course, is in the courts. So that's the reason why you're right about the Archivist. That's an executive function that we, as you point out, is not necessary for the equal rights to be in the Constitution. So we believe that we are celebrating the 2nd anniversary of the equal rights being in our Constitution. The question is, will it be enforced? And that's going to be up to the courts. And that's the reason why we have litigation today. And that's what President Biden basically said in the Office of Legal Counsel, that the courts and Congress can be more definitive on this. The enforcement's in the courts. The Congress could clarify by the passage of the resolutions we've talked about. So we all have a role, but we do believe it's part of the Constitution today.
Congresswoman Spear?
Well, Senator Cardin is absolutely right. Congress has already passed, or at least the House has already passed HJ Res 17, which clarifies that 38 states have in fact passed and ratified the amendment, and we have struck the deadline to make it perfectly clear. The Senate is about to move forward on that. The president has indicated his support for that. And it is, like so many things in our open society, subject to legal challenge. And so that's what we are looking at right now. But in our minds, it is law. And hopefully lawsuits that are pursued will underscore that.
Thank you both. Thank you. And in terms of the ERA coalition, we have always had the position that we were following all paths forward, whether they were necessary now or later. And so we thank you all for the work that you're doing. Are there any other questions? Carrie, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much. Just to clarify that this is not a necessary action, but it's a supportive action that will be useful in the courts. Thank you.
Right, exactly. And Michelle, you wanted to add to this? That would be great.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, Article 5 under the Constitution is a team effort between Congress and the states. And under Article 5, the moment the necessary number of states ratify, the amendment does become part of the Constitution, which is why we're celebrating the end of the 2-year waiting period today. I think as a practical matter, there's also the court of public opinion and people's recognition about what's in the Constitution and what isn't. And when the archivist refuses to play his ministerial role of publishing and certifying the Equal Rights Amendment, that does have, a meaning in the sense that it injures the states and Congress that played their role under the Constitution. And so even though there isn't kind of a legal impact in the sense that the 28th Amendment became part of the Constitution the moment Virginia ratified, there's the practical impact, the fact that we're here having this conversation as opposed to celebrating, you know, an official copy of the Constitution, having the 28th Amendment in it in the National Archives, or the archivist going through his ceremonial duty of certifying and publishing. And so that's why this team effort, it can't hurt. The more people who are out there saying the Equal Rights Amendment is really part of the Constitution, and having congressional recognition of it is wonderful. Congress has recognized past amendments, and even the president has recognized past amendments, and there's no reason why that shouldn't happen here as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Are there any other questions?
There is one. Veronica from CNN put in the Q&A. So sorry if I missed whether this was addressed, but can you please react to the newest OLC opinion issued yesterday and what it means for the ERA's publication?
Well, we understand that Chair Maloney has joined us now, has her audio up. Are you with us, Chair Maloney? Because
yes, I'm here.
Great, thank you.
Call to
the question from CNN is about the OLC memo, and we noticed we'd received your press release that in response to it. Would you like to pick up on that right now?
Well, first of all, we are saying that the Biden administration has now come out and said that they would remove it, and that it's up to Congress, but we want him to solidify his record in support of supporting women by taking the step of putting forward another memo that says that, of course, that it's recognized. He could seal the deal of the century by instructing the archivist to certify and publish the ERA and solidify his record. As we know, yesterday, the Justice Department acknowledged that a Trump DOJ opinion that has been holding back the archivist from recognizing the ERA is flawed. But we need the administration to take the step of removing that memo, that flawed, erroneous memo, which many constitutional scholars have come out in various reports and attacked. Removing it and putting forward another one in support of it, or just letting the archivist go forward. Earlier, even when he first became the archivist, I wrote him about the ERA and that it was his job to certify it. He wrote me back, I've got the letter saying that he supports the ERA and that he would do it. Then later, when it was finally ratified by Virginia, he wrote DOJ and asked for their guidance, the Trump administration. What do you think they're going to say? They've had a whole history of holding women down and back, attacking Title IX, Title VII, access to abortion, you name it. So what do you expect them to say? And that erroneous political memo should be removed, withdrawn, and the Biden administration should put forward their own memo or just allow the archivists, like most of America. He says he believes in the ERA. Well, if you believe in it, just certify it. He's the one holding it back. And it's a technicality. Equality is not a technicality. Equality is a right. We have met every single requirement that was put forward. There were only two in the Constitution. One was that you had to have 2/3 of Congress. We had more than 2/3 of Congress when we passed it, and that 38 states have to ratify it. We've done that. We passed it. We've met every requirement in the Constitution, and they're still throwing a blockade in front of us, trying to stop us from getting our rights. This has been a fight for a long, long time, and many of us remember we ratified the 27th Amendment 200 years later. We're following the same process now, and with my colleague Jackie Spear, we're putting a resolution in tomorrow, like they did with the 200th, just affirming that this is what has taken place. So with that, maybe I should give my statement.
Right. Congresswoman Spear, did you want to add to that? And Senator Cardin?
Well, I think Carolyn said it robustly. Let's be perfectly clear. If the archivist wants to go down in history for a good reason, he should certify it. He has the opportunity, the power to do so. And in doing so, he will place this question in the courts in a very straightforward fashion, but then it will be law. And that's why I think we should continue to encourage the archivists to do what the Constitution requires that he does.
Senator Cardin.
And I think Carolyn Maloney has expressed it correctly. We always find that there are additional obstacles being put in the way of those who do not want to see equal rights. And clearly the two qualifications have been met. We believe it is part of the Constitution today, and we would hope that those in the executive branch would do what they need to reaffirm that fact. The Congress should do what it can do to clarify that point. That's why we have the resolutions in Congress, and we rely upon the courts to enforce our laws of equality.
Another beat for any other questions, Chrissy?
Yes, before the chairwoman makes her statement, we did have just one more from Barbara Rodriguez with the 19th. She asked if there was any additional information about what the archivist might do now.
Carolyn Maloney, any idea about the archivist? You're perhaps, we describe you as his boss in a way, and you have invited us into a meeting with him. So we have met with him where he personally expressed he said to us that it would be his highest honor to publish the ERA. Do we have next steps? Barbara Rodriguez from the 19th is asking.
Well, I would just say, who cares what the archivist is going to do? But the important thing is that in his heart of hearts, he told us how much he believed in the ERA, that he wanted to be the archivist that would make it happen, to deliver it and do his ceremonial job and ratify it. So that's exactly what he should do. And it is ridiculous that he's holding this up. And it's ridiculous that people in power are allowing him to do it. He says, I'm just like a secretary. Well, we have the Biden administration. We have the majority of the people. The polls I've seen, over 90% of the people believe in and want the Equal Rights Amendment to become part of the Constitution, so that violence against women, for equal pay, for equal work, for all of the rights and empower women. As we always say, when women succeed, America succeeds. We'll allow them to succeed by giving them the protections and empowering them in the Constitution. Right now, he believes in his heart, so he said, like most Americans, that it should be ratified. Well, he should do it. And that's that. That's as simple as it is. And I just now would like to say that I want to give my heartfelt congratulations to the ERA Coalition for being the North Star and totally focused on passing and ratifying and building the coalition of support for the ERA. All of us in government, Jackie and I, are often called into emergency meetings, other things before Congress that pulls us away from it. But you have kept your eye on the ball. You have moved us to where we are now, and we are all deeply grateful. And I want to express my gratitude to my colleague and partner, Jackie Spear, and express how sad I am that she has decided to retire. But I'm sure she will continue working with us every day to enforce and to really bring the reality of the Equal Rights Amendment into the lives of the American women. But today is a day of celebration. Exactly 2 years after Virginia's ratification on January 27th, 2020, the ERA becomes legally enforceable, and we deserve to celebrate. There are only 2 requirements for amendments under Article 5 of the Constitution, and we have met both of them. The women of America and like-minded men have met this. We passed the ERA through Congress by far more than the 2/3 required and sent it to the states in 1972. Virginia voted to ratify in 2020 and was the last state needed to fulfill the 3/4 state ratifications requirements. Some concerns are being raised by the original 7-year time limit in the preamble of the ERA, but Article 5 contains no deadlines for the amending process. In most of the constitutional amendments, there's been no deadlines. In other words, deadlines are absent and per se are unconstitutional. In addition, the time limit Congress attached to the ERA was not included in the body of the amendment text that was ratified by the 38 states. It was just in the preamble and therefore not binding. In sum, we did it. I want to take a moment to celebrate all of the ERA advocates who never gave up the fight. We are on the cusp of making history and empowering women thanks to their tenacity. And tomorrow, along with 100 representatives, Congresswoman Spire, and my colleagues in the House, we will introduce a new resolution to affirm that the ERA has already been validly ratified and should be recognized as the 28th Amendment. This is the exact same type of resolution Congress passed for the most recent amendment, the 27th Amendment in 1992, affirming its validity even after it took more than 200 years to ratify. Even though the ERA has met all the requirements to become a constitutional amendment, making it legally enforceable, our century-long struggle to enshrine equal rights for women in our Constitution is not over yet. The final step is the certification of the last 3 states to ratify, Nevada, Illinois, and Virginia, and publication of the amendment by the Archivist of the United States in the Federal Register. That's it. That's what's holding us back from full equality. I usually talk about the ERA as an issue that impacts things like equal pay and violence against women. Up until now, I thought that the right to choose was a solidly established constitutional right. But shockingly, that is no longer the case. Abortion access is on the chopping block. It is not possible to have a true democracy without control over our own bodies. This makes the ERA even more urgent. Yesterday, the Justice Department acknowledged that a Trump DOJ opinion that has been holding back the Archivist from recognizing the ERA is flawed. This morning, President Biden made a public statement in support of the ERA. President Biden must seal the deal on our century of work by instructing the Archivist to certify and publish the ERA and solidify his legacy as a champion for women. We have spent generations in this fight, and we owe it to the next generation to get it done. We owe it to women and girls in this country to put our promise for an equal future squarely in our nation's most foundational document, proving our commitment to equality and to them is permanent. And that's it. We've done it, and a technicality cannot stand in our way. And the Archivist, we have met the requirements. He should do his job.
Thank you so much, Chair Maloney, and for your leadership. I want to thank Senators Cardin and Hirona and Congresswomen Spear and Maloney for being with us at this, for the beginning of our news conference, for your leadership and for always participating to make sure that the word gets out, that we understand the fight that we're in. We so appreciate it. As we said at the top of the news conference, the coalition has 210 organizations across the country, partners who work with us. And I just want to express my thanks to all of the women and the men who are and non-binary, because as we know, no discrimination against sex includes LGBTQ rights as well. The organization has expanded from what was a very narrow niche of people who believed in the Equal Rights Amendment to a very broad river now of various movements in voting, civil rights, reproductive rights, faith, all kinds of disability, all kinds of issues, where now the Equal Rights Amendment is perhaps the last line of defense. And so at this point, would like to introduce one of our partners who's been a stalwart activist for us, Christian Nunes, who's president of the National Organization of Women. She's been a great friend and partner in the fight for sex equality. And Christian, we're so glad you're with us today, helping to sponsor this conference and our events in Washington today.
Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here. I'm glad to be with everyone this morning for this historic coalition and our support for the full Constitution and equality for women. I wanted to thank all the members of Congress who have continuously championed for the ratification of the ERA, all the coalition partners, ERA Coalition, as well as all the activists who have tirelessly worked for more than 99 years to continuously try to make sure that we had the ratification of the ERA. And I also want to thank President Biden for this morning making his statement that he supports the enshrinement of the ERA into the Constitution. We all agree that there's more work to be done, but I do want to thank him for making that statement today. The National Organization for Women has been one of the leading forces of the ERA since our very beginning. Now adopted a resolution of support for the ERA at our second national conference in 1967. And in February of 1970, now leaders disrupted Senate hearings to demand that the ERA be considered by the full Congress. In that May, a hearing proposed by an amendment was held by the now President Eileen Hernandez and now member Representative Shirley Chisholm, testifying in support. And she delivered a very powerful speech that I think resonates with me today, and I think all of us, what we're still seeing and still hearing. And her speech was called Equal Rights for Women on the House floor. And in that speech, she said, "Mr. Speaker, House Joint Resolution 264 before us today, which provides for equality under the law for both men and women, represents one of the most clear-cut opportunities we are likely to have to declare our faith in the principles shaped our Constitution. It provides a legal basis for attack on the most subtle, most pervasive, and most institutionalized form of prejudice that exists. Discrimination against women solely on the basis of their sex, is so widespread that it seems many persons normal, natural, and right." But this is a part that I think really sticks out to me, as she continued to say that this is what it comes down to. Artificial distinctions between persons must be wiped out of this law. Legal discrimination between the sexes is, in almost every instance, founded on outmoded views of society, pre-scientific beliefs, and psychology and physiology. It's time to sweep these out. It's time to remove these relics of the past and see future generation and set them free. Remove this form of oppression is what we really need to do, right? So we know opponents who are clearly trying to stand in the way of the Equal Rights Amendment being ratified have no basis to their amendment. They have no basis to their argument. They're just trying to continue forms of oppression and continued forms of trying to have power and control. But we also know what we're seeing is that there is something happening in our Senate, which is continuing to hold democracy from truly happening. And that is the filibuster. So breaking the blockage of the filibuster not only opened the doors to democracy, the ERA has overwhelming support with 94% support for this amendment. It's bipartisan support. So many co-sponsors, as we've heard. But this filibuster continues to eliminate the passage of important bills and acts, including the removal of the time limit for the ERA for cash ratification, as well as other priorities that we need that also enforce oppression, like Freedom to Vote Act and John Lewis Voting Rights Act. So as we have so many members of Congress who support this and senators who are working tirelessly to champion for us, we are still calling for the Senate to work to think about the importance of this and what legacy they're setting, and work to end the filibuster and unblock the equality agenda that we need today. We need the ERA ratified, we need the time limit removed, and we need to have it, enshrined into our Constitution. This is extremely important, but we're also asked the Biden administration to do a little bit more and move them further. We want you to do everything in your power, your executive administrative power, to ensure that today and immediately the ERA is enshrined into our Constitution. The failure of the past framers of the Constitution intentionally let women off, and we have to demand the correction of this today. Women too long have waited, and we will not wait any longer. We need the ERA. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Christian. So great to be working beside you on this issue and others. Up next, Donna Lent is president of the National Women's Political Caucus, is in DC to take part in our rally, delivery of our petitions to the DOJ. All of our activities, has always been a stalwart supporter as well of the Equal Rights Amendment. Donna, thanks so much for being with us today.
Well, thank you. And thank you to the ERA Coalition for all of the work over these years that has been put in to bring us to today. And I will say happy birthing day to the 28th Amendment of the Constitution. Happy birthing day, because there is much to celebrate in this. And although we are not happy about anticipating the court battle that's going to become, the end dead focus for us, we are going to be focusing on that. I also want to thank all our members of Congress that have been with us. Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney and Congresswoman Jackie Spear. There isn't enough words to tell you how much your action in this regard means to all of us. So thank you. I'm going to just say that, the National Women's Political Caucus for a very long time has been working for an ERA. And we need to recognize all of the years that have gone into this fight. And I'm going to remind you, and I believe Ellie Smeal might have been on the floor at an NWPC event where one of our members, very early member, Jill Ruckelhaus, Republican woman, those were the days when Republicans fought for equality. And I'm hoping that we are going to have many more recognize how important this is, that we give equality to women and to everyone under the Constitution with the 28th Amendment. But don't think for one moment that we do not have a fight ahead of us, because we do. And I'm going to read to you a small part of a speech that Jill Ruckelhaus made that day. And this is what I am imploring each and every one of you to remember. And she started with, we are in for a very, very long haul. And I am asking for everything you have to give. We will never give up. You will lose your youth, your sleep, your patience, and your sense of humor, and occasionally the understanding and support of people that love you very much. In return, I have nothing to offer you but your pride in being a woman and all your dreams you have had for your daughters and nieces and granddaughters, your future, and the certain knowledge that at the end of your days, you will be able to look back and say, for once in your life, you gave everything for justice. And that speech was delivered in 1977. And it still holds true now today for the fight that we are going to have to take on to see this through the courts. Thank goodness we have Linda Cobley and many others on our side, our attorney for the ERA Coalition, member of the team. And we're just going to keep at this. This is not going to go away. So although we are celebrating today and we are saying happy birthday day to the 28th Amendment, the struggle continues. Thank you. I hope that you will see that we're going to have a wonderful rally this afternoon, and we're still going to go through with our schedule of events for today. And I'm happy to be here in Washington, D.C. with my sisters and brothers supporting the ERA. Thank you.
Donna, thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for that speech, the long haul, and to remember that you gave it all for justice, which I think that so many of the people on this call today are engaged in as well. Our next speaker is Joycelyn Tate. She's here from the Black Women's Roundtable, serving as their senior policy advisor, and she's here to talk about the position of the Black Women's Roundtable in support of the ERA. And Joycelyn, thank you. We know that we watch you and Melanie Campbell getting arrested for all kinds of causes, and you're always there for us on the Equal Rights Amendment. Thank you so much for being here today.
Well, thank you, Carol, and good morning. Again, I'm Joycelyn Tate, the Senior Policy Advisor at the Black Women's Roundtable, and a proud member of the ERA Coalition. And we want to thank all the members of Congress who have supported the ERA, and thank President Biden for his statement this morning in support of the ERA. It is unconscionable that in 2022, women still don't have the constitutional guarantee of equality under the law. And the only thing that will permanently enshrine protections and equality for women and girls in our Constitution is the ERA. And for Black women who have fought for generations on two battlefronts at the intersection of gender and racial equality and justice, the ERA brings us another step closer to that true equality in our fight to tear down the combination of racism and sexism in our nation. And as my grandmother used to tell me, baby, Black women have to fight Jim Crow and Jane Crow. So today, we look back 2 years ago today, history was made when Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. And this, when they ratified, it marked the ERA as reaching its constitutionally required threshold for ratification. But here we are today, 2 years later, to the day when the ERA should be law, and one civil servant is standing in the way of recording this history, and that's the Archivist. And he's doing this based on a flawed memo from the previous administration's legal counsel. So today, I still hear my grandmother telling me how women have to fight to be seen, heard, and treated equally and fairly. So I'm channeling my grandmother today. And she would say, regardless of whether the onus is onus of equality hinges for women, hinges on a memo from the DOJ, the courts, or the Congress, it's time's up for the obstructionists and the obstructions that deny gender equality and the economic, human, and democracy rights that come with the ERA. Generations of women and men have fought for the ERA. It's time for the ERA to have its permanent home in the Constitution. So I thank you, Carol, for having me here to speak today. We stand as the Black Women's Roundtable in unity and solidarity with you. I thank you, and I say on behalf of my grandmother, it's time for the ERA to become law.
Joycelyn, thank you. I'm going to add my Linda Coberly has been mentioned, I think, a couple of times already. For those of us who know, for those of you who know the coalition, Linda Coberly is the chair of our legal task force. In other words, the go-to person whenever we need to ask her, Linda, what does this mean? And so I'm thrilled that she's here and can explain the clarification memo that came late last night. We've been on the phone. If some of us are hoarse, it's because we've been talking ever since this memo was issued last night. Linda, what does this memo mean, and what are the steps forward for the coalition as you see it?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, I just want to say it's a thrill to be here. It's a thrill to be on the screen with all of these amazing advocates who've been fighting for a long time, a short time, sometime, many of them decades for the ERA. So I'm really thrilled to be here with you all. And it's a really exciting day. I mean, there are developments by the minute, as you know. So the clarification by the OLC came yesterday, and I'll start with what it didn't do, which is it didn't revoke altogether the prior OLC memo. but it did clarify it in a really important way, and I'll say in two really important ways. One is it explained that the 2020 OLC memo had treated the issue of what could happen now. Can the ERA come back? Too lightly. It treated that issue as if it were clear cut when it's not. And this is no surprise. This has literally never happened before. So it's not a surprise that people find this a difficult legal issue. So what the OLC clarification does is it makes clear that whatever that 2020 memo is, it doesn't stand in the way of Congress. In fact, it's up to Congress to act. The clarification also makes clear that it doesn't govern courts, that it's up to courts to decide whether the ERA is in the Constitution today. And we have both of those things going on right now. So we have an action in Congress driving forward to have the time limit removal bills passed in both houses. We have it in the House. We're looking for ways to get it done in the Senate with now our 52 co-sponsors. And what that would do is remove any question about this. It would remove the question by removing the time limits itself. And as Michelle Callan said earlier, if Congress has the power to put a time limit in the preamble to an amendment, it also has the power to take it out after the fact. So that's what the legislation would do. But at the same time, the litigation is moving forward. And our position in the litigation is that we don't need Congress, that the ERA is valid today. And that is an issue that's going to be litigated in the DC Circuit. It's probably going to be litigated in other courts as well. And it's ultimately going to be decided by a court. I would love to see it also decided by Congress. I think that just shores up our position. But either way, there's two different paths forward. And the OLC clarification makes clear that the old memo doesn't stand in the way of either one of them. So that's how I see that memo. It would be terrific, and I hope the Archivist does just go ahead and certify. I mean, one way to look at this is that, you know, it's up to Congress to decide how this is supposed to work. And Congress has decided how it's supposed to work. It enacted a statute that gave the Archivist the responsibility to publish and certify an amendment after it gets 38 ratifications. That's essentially what the statute says. There's nothing in this, just like there's nothing in Article 5 about a time limit, there's nothing in the statute about a time limit. So the Archivist could go ahead and certify today, and we need to continue the pressure to go ahead and do that. But whether the Archivist certifies or not, that doesn't prevent us from arguing and asserting in court, and as we speak with state legislatures about revising statutes, that the ERA is valid and in the Constitution today.
Great, thank you, Linda. You made all of that seem so simple, right? Last night, phone calls, hither and yon. What does that mean? We do want to thank President Biden, though, for for supporting the Equal Rights Amendment, and also for supporting the House resolution that Congresswomen Spear and Maloney have introduced, and that is a sure-footed way forward as well. At this point, would like to introduce Kim Russell, who is the creative director of the Women's March. And the Women's March organization has been a continued supporter of more inclusive society through the mobilization, as you well know, of millions of everyday women. And we're grateful to have her on the side of the ERA for many events and times. Kim, thanks for being here today.
Thank you, Carol. I am so grateful to be here today on behalf of Women's March and as a member of the ERA Coalition. While we've been fighting for equal rights for 100 years now, I want to recognize that last Friday marked the 5-year anniversary of our historic inaugural Women's March. So back then, on January 21st, 2017, 5 million marchers showed up and stood up in big cities and small towns all across this country and the world, and even on every continent, Antarctica included. Their message and our message was simple. In the face of these attacks on our bodies, our rights, and our most vulnerable communities, women will resist. 5 years later, that hasn't changed. We are still showing up. we're still standing up, and we're not going anywhere. Still, some things have changed, and for the better. Over the past 5 years, we have uplifted the power of everyday women to propel the blue wave. We unseated a president, and we elected our first ever female vice president. Also, in these past 5 years, Virginia became the 38th state to ratify the Equal Rights Amendment. And finally, after decades of struggling and rallying, petitioning our elected representatives, a supermajority of the US states affirmed what the original drafters of the ERA already knew, is that women's equality should be the law of the land, and it must be written into the law of the land. And it's just not the supermajority of states, it's also a supermajority of Americans. Today, 94% of Americans support the ERA. Back when this amendment was first introduced in 1923, it was a fringe issue, like most women's rights were as a whole. But that couldn't be further from the truth today, because we know that the equality of women is the key to the advancement of our country. And we know that when the amendment becomes part of the Constitution, it will fundamentally transform all of our lives and livelihoods. And that's why we at Women's March are part of this ERA coalition to do whatever it takes to get the Equal Rights Amendment enshrined into our Constitution. And to quote Representative Maloney from earlier today, equality is not a technicality. Our movement has come so far these past 5 and even 100 years. We've shown that there's strength in numbers. We've shown we're in it for the long haul. We've shown that we will resist. And we've shown that women's equality is a fight that's just as important in red states as it is in blue states. So together, I know that we can build our momentum and make this happen. This is our year. We will get the ERA into the Constitution, and we will not stop until that day comes. Thanks for having me.
Kim, thank you so much. Thank you. 5 years. That was a fast 5 years, but as you say, a lot accomplished. Next up, would like to introduce Sophia Arment. She's the chair of the Feminist Front, a group of young people serving as an intersectional feminist organization to get dedicated to fighting the patriarchy, transphobia, white supremacy, anti-Blackness, and settler colonialism. We're so glad to have Sophia with us, and it's good to have her in the room too when we're having discussions. She brings a totally new perspective to everything we're talking about. Sophia.
Thank you so much, Carol, and thank you again to the ERA Coalition. We are a proud member and partner, and we are the next generation's feminists, and we know we need the ERA. So I want to just first start by saying today is a day of celebration, and it's also a day for courage. I want us to sit in that courage. The people who came before us use theirs, and also to think about the people yet to come, their courage. They need us too. I come to you as the co-chair of the Feminist Front. I come to you as a Middle Eastern American, a feminist, a young person, a student, to say ERA now. Publish it and enforce it. These are our rights. These are our freedoms. The ERA is our right. Women and people of marginalized genders, from the interpersonal to the institutional, make our society run in this country. And we have seen it now more than ever during the pandemic in every sector of our society. And in the ERA fight, we know that we have been fighting, we have done our due diligence, we have covered every corner of this country, and that the American people support the ERA. Women have fought, we have marched, we have worked, and we have organized to get to this point today. We know from partner to structural violence, from equal pay to healthcare and workplace discrimination, the ERA is our tool towards freedom and justice to finally right some of the wrongs, some of the erasures in the founding of this country. To policymakers who are dragging their feet, I ask you, how many generations do you see in me, in my face? There can be no more excuses, no more dilly-dallying or waste of time. Too many excuses, generation after generation. Us Gen Z and millennials say no more. This is our year. This is the ERA's 2022 day and year to finally put gender and sex into the US Constitution. I want to say this and end with this because there is no shortage of brilliance in this room. There's no shortage of fight, and I know we will continue on. But I want to name this very clearly. We are equal by birth, and it is time our Constitution reflect that. Thank you all for joining us, and we call on our policymakers, whether in the executive, legislative, or judicial branch, to have our backs and to finally put the ERA in the Constitution.
Sophia, thank you so much. Thank you to your members for everything that you bring to our coalition. We're so glad. And we're looking forward to your leadership and your generations of putting lived equality in action, having moved from this point on. Well, Ellie Smeal, co-founder of the Feminist Majority, our leader, so we call her, is also our closer, because no one is able to put into one's heart and one's words, what this means today. The declaration of the ERA, alive and well, not counted out as so many have, done in the past and even currently. So Ellie, please, leave us with your words of encouragement and grace.
Thank you very much, Carol. And I've given the task of trying to summarize all this, and I don't think that's possible. I want to, I heard the battle cry very clearly of Congresswoman Maloney, and I agree with it. We're going to get this thing published and certified. It is so preposterous that we've had to go, and I've marched the last 50 some years over and over and over to state by state. This is, I think the only thing I've ever would quote from Scalia is it takes about 2%, he said, of the population to block an amendment right now. Well, we're not going to let this blockade happen. I think that the fact, and I want to thank all the people in the ERA coalition, the fact that we have declared, because it is true, that the ERA has met all requirements. It is law. It is, the certification is a symbol, but we deserve that symbol. We have met the 2 qualifications that count, and to make us go through one hoop after another is ridiculous. I agree with Congresswoman Maloney. It is totally ridiculous, and we're not going to let it happen. We think that he should certify and publish it now. Let the opposition appeal, and yes, it'll go to the courts, but basically we know this thing has passed. And I want to tell you something about the courts. 2 groups were left out of the Constitution for having anything to do with the amendment. 1 was the executive branch, and 2 was the courts. They were left out on purpose because the founders did not want this to become a king run, one person run show. And remember, the courts all were chosen by presidents. The legislatures had, well, the Senate has a confirmation role, but that's it. And basically to elevate them to be equal to what is the original requirement, which was hard enough as it was, 2/3 of all the members of Congress and 3/4 of the states, and then to put on other levels is to make sure this Constitution is never modernized. It's an embarrassment and a shame that 85% of constitutions that are written carry an equality clause on the basis of sex, and that we don't. And that's because of this ridiculously hard process. And so I agree that we should keep the pressure on not only on the archivist, but frankly, we need help from everybody. And I want to salute Congresswoman Maloney for the battle cry. I want to salute Jackie Spear for the we're going to miss her so much in Congress. I hope she's coming back in the Senate, but I didn't say that. I hope that she's doesn't end her career now. She's been steadfast and very, very important, this resolution that both she and Maloney are supporting. It says the truth. The ERA has been ratified. It is the law of the land. It should be given the privilege of being certified and published. And then if somebody wants to challenge it, at least it's where it should be in the Constitution now. I also am I salute the coalition that they're looking forward, and they're going to try to see if they're going to try a very important step of having states now look at their rules and laws and see how many conflict with the true equality. And basically, that is very encouraging because we can have more and more and more things corrected as we formally close the deal, because we are going to close the deal. We are going to be in the Constitution. We are going to have equality. In fact, I think we're more than equal right now. And so I say there's a lot of work to do. We're going to the rally. We're going to deliver then to the Attorney General. Something like 80,000 people have signed statements saying that it's equal. And by the way, that's just the beginning. We'll keep going because we want to make sure we not only enshrine it in the Constitution, but we enforce it. Because without the enforcement, it's just a symbol. We want the enforcement because we do not want to waste another generation of women's talents. This world has a lot of challenges right now, and half of the world should not have to sit on the sidelines or to work twice as hard for half as much, or there's so many wrongs that have to be fixed, that we should start fixing them so we have the full potential of all the human race for all the challenges that lie ahead, and not another generation of girls and women and people who do not fit the binary be wasted. This is our time to move forward. Thank you very much. Everybody make that pledge of Reckles House. And the reason, you're right, Donna, I was there. I was one of the co-founders. There's a lot of us that started the Women's Political Caucus because we knew that we had to have political power. And Ruckles House was a leading Republican. And let's be clear, from the beginning, there was bipartisan support, much more in the days of the Betty Fords, who was one of the chairs of the ERA drive at one time, and a lot of people that were moderate Republicans, not this right-wing crowd that has taken over. And so we got to remember, we're over 90% support in the population. It goes way beyond political power. It's this gut instinct that we all know that women and girls, and I just love what Sophia just said, we were born equal. Now let's win that equality and this artificial still power of the patriarchy, which has hurt the human race. We have to go to that position of equality that we were born in and use our full potential. Thank you, everybody that's been here. And we have a fight left. So we need to keep increasing our numbers, because the fight really now is that we're going to enforce this. We're not going to only enshrine it, we're going to enforce it. Thank you, Carol, for all you've done. And all of us are real tired because of what happened last night, but we got to look at it as a victory. And we're now going to a march in 20-some degree weather. I can't
Right. Exactly.
much.
Ellie, you see what I mean? You know, Ellie is the one who always, closes us out and sends us off to march. And right, we have a rally at noon in front of the White House. We can say thank you, but we're not stopping. We want, even though we don't need it, we want our children and grandchildren to open up the Constitution and, see the 28th Amendment there. But we are, as Ellie says, enforcing it, delivering the 80,000 signatures. Thank you all who signed that to make sure that the White House and all the Department of Justice know that we're not just 5 people in a room. So we're saying, you know, we want the Equal Rights Amendment, but that millions of people in America want it. And we thank you so much for being a part of this news conference. I do want to say, if there are any other questions before we close it out, would like to give a beat for that to happen. You know, we've had a lot of speakers, and just let us know. Chrissy, any further questions?
I'm not seeing any. Allison asked, and I confirmed that we will still be collecting signatures on our petition to the Attorney General. So, you know, please keep sharing that and getting that out there. This work doesn't stop. So I'm not seeing any other questions. I think we're good.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all so much. We'll see you in the trenches.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone.
Thank you.